King David had grown old, and the years had caught up with him. At that time, Adonias, whose mother was named Haggith, boasted, saying, "I will be the king's successor." He prepared chariots, horsemen, and 50 men to run before him. Adonias spoke with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with the priest Abiathar, and they supported him. However, the priest Zadok, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, the prophet Nathan, Shimei, Ray, and King David's personal guard did not support him. Adonias held a coronation feast, sacrificing sheep, cattle, and fattened calves near the stone of Zoleth, close to the spring of Rogel. He invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the influential servants of the king in Judah. However, he did not invite the prophet Nathan, Benaiah, the king's personal guard, or his brother Solomon. Nathan approached Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, and said, "Did you know that Adonias, the son of Haggith, has declared himself king, and our Lord King David is unaware? Now, let me tell you how you can save your life and the life of Solomon. Go immediately to King David and say, 'My Lord and King, did you not promise me, in the name of the Eternal your God, that my son Solomon would be your successor as king and sit on your throne? Then why has Adonias been crowned king? While you are speaking to the king, I will come in and confirm what you have said." Bathsheba hurried to the king's chamber. He was very old, and Abishag was attending to him. When Bathsheba bowed in reverence, the king asked, "What do you wish?" She replied, "My lord, you swore to me by the Eternal your God that my son Solomon would succeed you as king and sit on your throne. But now Adonias has proclaimed himself king, and you, my lord, are unaware. He has held a great coronation feast, offering cattle, fattened calves, and sheep. He invited all the king's sons, the priest Abiathar, and Joab, the commander of the army, but your servant Solomon was not invited. All of Israel is watching, waiting to see what you will do. They are eager to know who will succeed you. If you do nothing, on the day you are buried, my son and I will be condemned to death." While she was speaking, the prophet Nathan arrived at the palace. The king was informed, "The prophet Nathan is here." Nathan entered the king's presence, bowed with his face to the ground, and said, "My lord and king, did you declare that Adonias will be your successor as king and sit on your throne? For that is what is happening. He has held a grand coronation feast with cattle, fattened calves, and sheep. He has invited all the king's sons, the army officers, and the priest Abiathar. They are feasting, drinking, and shouting, 'Long live King Adonias!' But I, the priest Zadok, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and your servant Solomon were not invited. Is this something the king, my lord, has done without our knowledge, without telling us that Adonias should be your successor?" King David reacted immediately and commanded, "Bring Bathsheba back here." She returned to the room, and the king solemnly promised, "As surely as the Eternal lives, the God who has delivered me from all my troubles, I will fulfill what I promised you. By the Eternal, your son Solomon will be my successor as king and sit on my throne, and it will happen today." Bathsheba bowed with her face to the ground, kneeling in reverence, and said, "May my lord King David live forever." King David then said, "Call the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada." When they came before him, King David gave them these orders: "Take my son Solomon, place him on my royal mule, and lead the procession to Gihon. There, the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan will anoint him king over Israel. Then sound the trumpet and shout, 'Long live King Solomon!' Afterward, escort him back here, and he will sit on my throne, becoming my successor. I have appointed him king over Israel and Judah." Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, supported the king, saying, "So be it. May the Eternal God of my lord the king confirm this. Just as the Eternal was with my lord King David, may he be with Solomon, and may his reign be even greater than yours." The priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, the king's personal guard, the Cherethites, and the Pelethites went down, placed Solomon on King David's mule, and led him to Gihon. The priest Zadok took a flask of oil from the sanctuary and anointed Solomon. They sounded the trumpets, and everyone shouted, "Long live King Solomon!" The people gathered in celebration, playing instruments and singing, and the ground shook with the noise. Meanwhile, Adonias and all his guests were finishing their coronation feast when they received the news. When Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, he asked, "What is this commotion?" In the midst of the discussion, Jonathan, the son of the priest Abiathar, arrived. Adonias said, "Welcome, a good and courageous man. Like you must bring good news." But Jonathan replied, "Unfortunately, no. King David has just proclaimed Solomon king, and the new king has the support of the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and the Cherethites and Pelethites. They placed Solomon on the royal mule, and the priest Zadok and the prophet Nathan anointed him king at Gihon. Now the procession is coming up, singing and celebrating. The whole city is in an uproar. What you hear is true. Solomon is seated on the throne." But that's not all. King David's officials went to congratulate him, saying, "May God make Solomon even more famous than you, and may his reign extend beyond yours." Even from his bed, the king prayed to God, "Blessed be the Eternal, the God of Israel, who has provided a successor for my throne and allowed me to live to see it." Adonias' guests, terrified, scattered. Adonias, fearing Solomon, fled to the sanctuary and clung to the horns of the altar. They told Solomon, "Adonias, fearing King Solomon, has taken refuge in the sanctuary and is clinging to the horns of the altar, saying, 'I will not leave here until King Solomon promises not to kill me.'" Solomon responded, "If he proves to be a worthy man, not a hair on his head will fall. But if he harbors malicious intentions, he will die." Solomon sent for him, and they brought him down from the altar. Adonias came, bowed in respect before King Solomon, and Solomon dismissed him, saying, "Go home." David's final acts and instructions to Solomon. As David neared death, he gave the following instructions to Solomon. "I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong and act like a man. Do what the Eternal commands. Walk in his ways, follow his instructions carefully, and take his teachings and ordinances seriously, as he revealed to Moses. If you do this, you will succeed in everything you undertake, and wherever you go, the Eternal will confirm his promise to me. If your descendants remain faithful and loyal to me, there will always be a successor on your throne over Israel. Do not forget what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to the two commanders of Israel's army, Abner son of Ner and Amasa son of Jether. He murdered them in cold blood during peacetime, as though it were wartime, and he has been stained with their blood ever since. Deal with him as you see fit, but ensure he does not escape justice. He must pay for what he has done. As for the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, show them kindness, because they stood by me when I fled from Absalom. And remember Shimei, the Benjaminite from Bahurim, who cursed me so cruelly when I was fleeing to Mahanaim. When I returned across the Jordan, I swore by the Eternal not to kill him, but you must not let him go unpunished. You are wise, you will know how to handle him and make him pay for his actions." After this, David rested with his ancestors, was buried in the city of David, and reigned for 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron and 33 in Jerusalem. Solomon ascended to his father David's throne, and his kingdom was firmly established. Adonias' request and downfall. Adonias, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She asked, "Do you come in peace?" He replied, "Yes, may I speak with you?" She said, "Of course, speak." He continued, "You know the kingdom was once mine, and everyone expected me to become king. But the Eternal decided otherwise, and the kingdom went to my brother. Now I have a request. Please do not deny me," she said. "Go ahead, what do you wish?" He replied, "Ask King Solomon to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. He will not refuse you." Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to the king on your behalf." Bathsheba went to King Solomon to convey Adonias' request. The king rose to greet her, bowing respectfully, then sat back on his throne. He had a seat placed beside him for his mother, and she sat at his right hand. Bathsheba began, "I have a small favor too. Ask, please do not deny me." The king said, "Speak, mother." "Of course, I will not refuse you," she said. "Give Abishag the Shunammite to your brother Adonias as his wife." King Solomon replied to his mother, "What kind of favor is this? Why are you asking for Abishag the Shunammite for Adonias? Ask for the kingdom while you're at it. He is my older brother, and he has the priest Abiathar and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, as allies." King Solomon swore by the Eternal, saying, "May God do to me as he wills if Adonias does not pay for this insult with his life. I swear by the Eternal, the God who established me on my father David's throne and entrusted me with the responsibility of the kingdom as he promised, that Adonias will die today." King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, who struck down Adonias. Then the king said to the priest Abiathar, "You are banished to your land in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not kill you for now, because you were entrusted with the Ark of the Eternal Lord during the days of my father David, and because you stood by him through all the difficult moments of his life. Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood, fulfilling the word of the Eternal concerning the house of Eli at Shiloh. When Joab, who had conspired with Adonias though he had remained loyal in the matter of Absalom, heard about this, he fled to the sanctuary of the Eternal and clung to the horns of the altar for protection. King Solomon was informed that Joab had taken refuge in the sanctuary and was clinging to the altar. Immediately, Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, with orders to kill him. Benaiah entered the sanctuary and said to Joab, "Come out," but Joab replied, "No, I will die here." Benaiah returned to the king and reported what had happened. The king said, "Then do as he says, kill him and bury him, so that I and my father's house may be innocent of the blood Joab shed unjustly." Joab had killed 2 men more righteous than himself: Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. The guilt for these crimes would fall on Joab and his descendants. May the peace of the Eternal rest upon David and his descendants, upon his dynasty and his kingdom forever, Solomon declared. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, then killed Joab, and he was buried in his family tomb in the field. As Joab's replacement, the king appointed Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, as commander of the army, and Zadok replaced Abiathar as priest. Next, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Build a house for yourself in Jerusalem. You will live there and are not to leave the city. If you cross the Kidron Valley, you will be signing your own death warrant." Shimei replied to the king, "Your servant will do exactly as my lord the king commands." Shimei moved to Jerusalem and lived there. 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves fled to the house of Achish, son of Maasach, king of Gath. Someone told Shimei, "Your slaves are in Gath." Shimei immediately saddled his donkey and went to Gath to search for them. After finding them, he brought them back. When Solomon heard about this, he summoned Shimei and said, "Didn't I make you swear by the Eternal and warn you clearly not to leave Jerusalem? Didn't I say that if you left the city, it would mean your death? Didn't you agree, saying, 'I will obey'? Why didn't you keep your oath to the Eternal and obey my command?" The king continued, "You know in your heart the evil you did to my father David. Now the Eternal will repay you for your wrongdoing, but the house of David will remain blessed under the protection of the Eternal." With that, the king ordered Benaiah to carry out the sentence, and he executed Shimei. Thus, the kingdom was firmly established under Solomon. Solomon requests wisdom under Solomon's reign. He formed an alliance with Pharaoh by marrying the daughter of the king of Egypt. He brought her to the city of David until the construction of the royal palace, the temple of the Eternal, and the wall around Jerusalem were completed. Meanwhile, the people worshipped at local shrines because the temple had not yet been built in the name of the Eternal. Solomon loved the Eternal and walked in the ways of his father David, though he also sacrificed at the local shrines, offering burnt offerings and incense. The king went to Gibeon, the most prominent of the local shrines, and offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar there. That night, in Gibeon, the Eternal appeared to Solomon in a dream and said, "What do you desire? Ask, and it will be given to you." Solomon replied, "You have shown great kindness to my father David, and he remained faithful to you. His relationships were just and upright. Now you continue to show your immense love by providing a successor to sit on his throne. Here I am, O Eternal. My God, you have made me king in place of my father David. I am young and inexperienced for this task, and I am surrounded by your chosen people, a great and numerous nation. Therefore, my request is this: give me an understanding heart to lead your people, so that I may discern between good and evil. For who can govern this great people of yours alone?" The Eternal was pleased with Solomon's request and said to him, "Because you did not ask for long life, riches, or the destruction of your enemies, but instead asked for wisdom and discernment to govern my people, I will grant your request. I will give you a wise and discerning heart such as no one has had before you, nor will anyone after you. As a bonus, I will also give you what you did not ask for, wealth and fame beyond measure. No king on earth will compare to you if you follow my ways and obey my teachings as your father David did. Then you will have a long life." Solomon awoke and realized it was a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the Ark of the Covenant, before the Lord, and worshipped, offering burnt offerings and peace offerings. Afterwards, he held a feast for all his servants. One day, 2 prostitutes came before the king. One of them said, "My lord, this woman and I live in the same house. While we were together, I gave birth to a child. 3 days later, she also gave birth. There was no one else in the house. During the night, her baby died because she rolled over it in her sleep. She got up in the middle of the night, took my living son from beside me, and placed her dead son next to me. When I woke up in the morning to nurse my child, I found the dead baby lying there. But when it became light, I realized it wasn't my son." The other woman interrupted, "That's not true. The living child is mine, and the dead one is hers." The first woman protested, "No, the dead child is yours, and the living one is mine." The king said, "What shall we do? You say the living child is yours, and the dead one is hers. She says the opposite, that the dead child is yours and the living one is hers." After reflecting for a moment, the king ordered, "Bring me a sword." When they brought the sword, the king commanded, "Cut the living child in two, and give half to one woman and half to the other." The woman whose son was alive, deeply moved by love for her child, pleaded, "Please, my lord, don't kill the child. Give it to her." But the other woman said, "If I can't have it, neither will you." The king then declared, "Give the living child to the first woman, she is the true mother." When the judgment was announced, news of the king's wisdom spread throughout Israel, and everyone marveled at his ability to judge, knowing that it was divine wisdom. The organization of Solomon's government. King Solomon began his reign over Israel well. These were the principal officials of his government: Azariah, son of Zadok, as priest; Elihoreph and Ahijah, sons of Shisha, as secretaries; Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, as historian; Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, as army commander; Zadok and Abiathar as priests; Azariah, son of Nathan, as superintendent of regional governors; Zabud, son of Nathan, as royal advisor; Ahishur as palace supervisor; and Adoniram, son of Abda, as overseer of forced labor. Solomon appointed 12 regional governors throughout Israel to provide provisions for the king and his household. Each governor was responsible for supplying provisions for 1 month of the year. Their names were as follows: in the hill country of Ephraim, Ben-Hur; in Makaz, Shalbim-Beth, Shemash, and Elon Beth-Hanan, Ben-Deker; in Arubath and Sako, and all the region of Hepher, Bana, son of Hashai; in Naphath Dor, Ben-Abinadab, who was married to Taphath, daughter of Solomon; in Tanach, Megiddo, and all of Beth-Shean near Zarethan, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean to Abel-Meholah across from Jokmeam, Bana, son of Ahilud; in Ramoth-Gilead and the villages of Jair, son of Manasseh, in Gilead, and in the region of Argob in Bashan, with its 60 walled cities and bronze-barred gates, Iddo's son Ahinadab; in Mahanaim, Ahimaaz, who was married to Basemath, daughter of Solomon; in Naphtali, Bana, son of Hori; in Asher and Aloth, Hoshea, son of Peruah; in Issachar, Shimei, son of Elah; in Benjamin, Jezaniah, son of Shaphat; in Gilead, the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan; Geber, son of Uri. He administered the entire district alone. The population of Judah and Israel had grown greatly, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All their needs were met, and the people ate, drank, and were content. Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River in the east to the territory of the Philistines in the west, extending to the border of Egypt. These kingdoms paid tribute and were under Solomon's dominion during his lifetime. The daily provisions for Solomon's palace were 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of ordinary flour, 10 fat oxen, 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, plus deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened poultry in abundance. Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms and kings west of the Euphrates, as far as Gaza. The entire region was at peace during Solomon's reign. All the inhabitants of Israel and Judah, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, lived securely and enjoyed good health. Everyone was satisfied with what they possessed. Solomon had 40,000 stalls for horses used in chariots and 12,000 horsemen. The regional governors, according to their assigned months, delivered the provisions required for King Solomon and all those supported by the royal household. There was always an abundance, and they also provided barley and fodder for the horses at the designated places. God granted Solomon great wisdom, profound knowledge, and deep understanding. Nothing was beyond the reach of his intellect. His wisdom surpassed that of all the wise men of the East. He excelled in all knowledge, surpassing even the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. His fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He composed 3,000 proverbs and wrote 1,005 songs. He had extensive knowledge of plants, from the great cedars of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows in the cracks of walls. He also understood everything about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. People came from all nations to hear him speak, including envoys and representatives of kings who had heard of his reputation and wisdom. Preparations for the construction of the temple. Hiram, king of Tyre, upon hearing that Solomon had been crowned king in place of David, sent ambassadors to Israel. Hiram had always been a friend of David. Solomon sent word to Hiram, saying, "You know that my father David could not build a temple for the Eternal because he was constantly at war, until the Eternal subdued all his enemies under his control. Now the Eternal has granted peace throughout the land. We have no enemies or threats. I believe this is the right time to build a temple for the Eternal, my God, as the Eternal promised my father David. Your son who succeeds you will build a house in my honor. Therefore, I need your help. I ask that you authorize the cutting of cedar trees from the forests of Lebanon. My workers will collaborate with yours, and I will pay your laborers whatever wages you determine. You know that among my people, no one is as skilled in cutting timber as the Sidonians." When Hiram received Solomon's message, he rejoiced greatly and exclaimed, "Blessed be the Eternal, who has given David such a wise son to rule over this great nation." He sent word to Solomon, "I have received your request for cedar and cypress wood. You will have all you desire. My workers will transport the timber from the forests of Lebanon to the sea, and I will float it to the location you specify, where you can unload it. In return, I only ask that you provide food for my household." Thus, Hiram supplied all the cedar and cypress wood that Solomon needed. In exchange, Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat and 20,000 cores of pure olive oil each year. The Eternal gave Solomon wisdom as he had promised, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, formalized through a treaty. King Solomon conscripted 30,000 men from all over Israel. He organized them into shifts of 10,000 men per month to work in the forests of Lebanon. They worked for 1 month and rested for 2. Adoniram was the overseer of the laborers. Solomon also had 70,000 unskilled laborers and 80,000 stonecutters in the mountains, along with 3,300 foremen to supervise the work and the workers. Following the king's orders, they transported huge blocks of stone, which would serve as the foundation for the temple. The builders of Solomon, Hiram, and the men of Gabal worked together to cut and prepare the wood and stones for the construction of the temple. The construction of the temple. In the 480th year after the Israelites left Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, Solomon began to build the temple of the Eternal. The temple Solomon built for the Eternal was 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. There was a portico along the 30-foot width of the temple that extended 15 feet outward. The temple had narrow latticed windows near the outer walls. The king constructed a side structure, containing multiple small rooms. The lower floor was 7.5 feet wide, the middle floor 9 feet wide, and the third floor 10.5 feet wide. He made ledges on the outer walls of the temple to support the beams. All the stone blocks for the temple were cut and finished at the quarry, so no sound of hammers, chisels, or any iron tools was heard at the construction site. The entrance to the lower floor was on the south side of the temple, and a staircase led to the 2nd and 3rd floors. This was how the construction was completed. Solomon made a ceiling structure of cedar wood and planks. The structure along the outer walls was joined to the temple with cedar beams, and the side chambers were 20.5 feet high. The word of the Eternal came to Solomon regarding the temple. "Concerning this temple you are building, it is important that you live according to my commands and obey everything I say, following my instructions carefully. If you do this, I will fulfill the promise I made to your father David. I will personally dwell among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel." Solomon completed the construction of the temple. He finished the interior from the floor to the ceiling with cedar boards. The interior was paneled with pine boards. He set aside 30 feet at the rear of the temple to construct the inner sanctuary, the most holy place, which he lined with cedar from floor to ceiling. For the flooring, he used cedar boards. The main sanctuary measured 18 meters in length. The entire interior of the temple was lined with carved cedar, adorned with designs of fruits and flowers, so that no stone was visible. All was covered with wood. The inner sanctuary of the temple was the place for the Ark of the Covenant of the Eternal. This inner sanctuary was 9 meters high, 9 meters wide, and 9 meters long, and everything was overlaid with gold. The cedar altar was also covered with pure gold. The entire interior of the temple was overlaid with gold, including golden chains. Hung at the front of the inner sanctuary, gold covered the walls, ceiling, floor, and even the altar. Gold everywhere. He also made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 4.5 meters tall. Both were identical in size and measurements. The wings of the cherubim, when fully extended, measured 4.5 meters from one wingtip to the other. He placed the cherubim in the inner sanctuary. Their outstretched wings spanned the entire width of the room. The tip of one cherub's wing touched one wall, while the tip of the other cherub's wing touched the opposite wall. In the center, their wings touched each other. The cherubim were also overlaid with gold. He carved figures of cherubim, palm trees, and flower blossoms on all the walls of both the main sanctuary and the inner sanctuary. The floors, both inside and outside, were overlaid with gold. He made doors of olive wood for the entrance to the inner sanctuary. The door frames had 5 sides, and the doors were intricately carved with cherubim, palm trees, and flowers, then overlaid with gold. Similarly, he constructed the entrance to the main sanctuary with door frames of olive wood, but these frames had 4 sides. The doors were made of pine, each having 2 panels that opened separately. They too were carved with cherubim, palm trees, and flowers, and overlaid with beaten gold. He built the inner courtyard with 3 layers of cut stone and a final layer of cedar planks. The foundation of the Temple of the Eternal was laid in the 4th year. In the month of Ziv, the construction was completed in every detail according to the plan in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, the 7th month, taking 7 years to build the temple. Solomon spent an additional 13 years building his palace. Construction of Solomon's palace. Solomon built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, measuring 45 meters long, 22.5 meters wide, and 13.5 meters high. It had 4 rows of cedar columns supporting 45 cedar beams, 15 beams in each row. The roof was covered with cedar on both sides. There were windows arranged in groups of 3, and rectangular doors were symmetrically organized. He constructed a colonnaded hall measuring 22.5 meters long and 13.5 meters wide. In front of it was another covered hall, its roof extending beyond the columns. He also built a throne room, called the Hall of Justice, where he judged legal matters. This hall was entirely paneled with cedar. Behind the Hall of Justice, Solomon built his private palace. In a similar style, he also constructed another palace for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. No expense was spared. All the stones used, both inside and out, from the foundation to the roof, were of the highest quality, precisely cut, finished, and polished. The foundation stones were massive, ranging from 3.6 to 4.5 meters in size, and of excellent quality. Above them were perfectly cut stones and cedar beams. The great outer courtyard was surrounded by a wall with 3 layers of cut stones and a final layer of cedar planks, just like the inner courtyard of the Temple of the Eternal. King Solomon summoned Hiram from Tyre. Hiram's mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was from Tyre. Hiram was highly skilled in bronze work and could execute any design. He came to assist Solomon and carried out all the bronze work. First, he cast 2 bronze pillars, each 8.1 meters tall and 5.4 meters in circumference. He also cast 2 bronze capitals to crown the tops of the pillars, each to point to 5 meters high and shaped like lila. Each capital was adorned with a network of 7 interwoven chains and 2 rows of 200 pomegranates covering the capitals at the tops of the pillars. He erected the pillars at the entrance of the temple's portico. The pillar on the south side he named *Jochen security, and the one on the north side he named *Boaz stability. The capitals atop the pillars were shaped like lila. After completing the pillars, Hiram began work on a large circular basin of cast metal. It measured 4.5 meters in diameter, to point to 5 meters in height, and 13.5 meters in circumference. Below the rim, there were 2 rows of decorative gourds, each spaced 5 centimeters apart, cast as a single piece with the basin. The basin rested on 12 bronze oxen, 3 facing north, 3 west, 3 south, and 3 east. The heads of the oxen faced outward, and the basin rested upon them. The backs of the oxen supported the basin, which was for fingers thick, and its rim was finished like a cup or a lily blossom. It had a capacity of 40,000 liters. Hiram also made 10 bronze stands, each measuring 1.8 meters long, 1.8 meters wide, and 1.35 meters high. On the sides were panels attached to the frames, engraved with figures of lions, oxen, and cherubim. Above and below the lions and oxen were decorative garlands of bronze. Each stand rested on 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles. The frames were cast with ornamental designs. Each stand had a circular opening 45 centimeters deep, set on a base 70 centimeters high, while the stand itself was square. The axles were attached under the stand, and the wheels were mounted on the axles. The wheels measured 70 centimeters in diameter and resembled chariot wheels, all cast entirely of bronze, including the axles, spokes, and hubs. At each corner of the stand was a handle cast as one piece with the stand. At the top of each stand was a rim 22 centimeters high. The frames and handles were cast together with the stand. The entire surface was engraved with cherubim, lions, and palm trees surrounded by wreath-like carvings. All the stands were identical and cast from the same mold. He also made 10 bronze basins, one for each stand, each holding 800 liters and measuring 1.8 meters in diameter. 5 stands were placed on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north side. The large basin was positioned in the southeast corner of the temple. Hiram completed all the utensils, buckets, shovels, and basins. He finished all the work for the temple of the Eternal as directed by King Solomon: 2 pillars, 2 capitals atop the pillars, 2 sets of chains to decorate the capitals, 400 pomegranates for the chains in 2 rows, 10 stands each with a basin, the large basin, 12 oxen beneath it, and various buckets, shovels, and basins. All the objects Hiram made for King Solomon for the temple of the Eternal were polished bronze, cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Sukkot and Zarethan. These utensils were never weighed because there were so many. No one has any idea how much bronze was used. Solomon also commissioned all the furnishings and other internal accessories for the temple of the Eternal: the golden altar, the golden table for the bread of the presence, 10 pure gold lampstands, 5 on the right and 5 on the left in front of the inner sanctuary, the flowers, lamps, and tongs of gold, the vessels, wick trimmers, basins for sprinkling, bowls, and incense burners of pure gold, and the hinges for the doors of the inner sanctuary, the most holy place, and the main hall. Thus, the work of King Solomon on the temple of the Eternal was completed. Afterward, he brought the consecrated items his father David had dedicated, the silver, gold, and utensils, and placed them in the treasury of the temple of the Eternal. ## Dedication of the temple. To celebrate the completion of the temple, King Solomon summoned all the leaders of Israel, the heads of the tribes and the clan leaders, to bring the Ark of the Covenant of the Eternal from Zion, the city of David. All Israel assembled before King Solomon in the month of Ethanim, the 7th month, for the great autumn festival. With all the leaders of Israel present, the priests carried the Ark of the Eternal and brought it, along with the tent of meeting and its sacred utensils, into the temple. King Solomon and the entire congregation of Israel stood before the Ark, worshiping and sacrificing countless sheep and cattle, so many that they could not be counted. The priests placed the Ark of the Covenant of the Eternal in its designated place within the inner sanctuary, the most holy place, beneath the wings of the cherubim. The outstretched wings of the cherubim covered the ark and its poles. The poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the entrance of the inner sanctuary, but not beyond. They remain there to this day. Inside the ark were only the 2 stone tablets Moses had placed there at Horeb, where the Eternal made a covenant with Israel after bringing his people out of Egypt. When the priests withdrew from the holy place, a cloud filled the temple of the Eternal. The priests could not perform their duties because of the cloud, for the glory of the Eternal filled the temple. Then Solomon prayed. The Eternal said he would dwell in thick darkness where no one could see him. "O God, I have built this majestic temple as a permanent sign of your invisible presence." The king then turned to the assembly and blessed the people, saying, "Blessed be the Eternal, the God of Israel, who personally spoke to my father David and has now fulfilled his promise, saying, since I brought my people Israel out of Egypt. I did not choose a city among the tribes of Israel to build a temple where my name would dwell, nor did I select anyone to rule over my people Israel. But I chose David to govern my people Israel. My father David desired to build a temple for the honor of the name of the Eternal, the God of Israel. However, the Eternal said, "That is good. It is good that you desire to build a temple to honor me. But it will not be you, it will be your son who builds it for the honor of my name." The Eternal fulfilled what he promised. I am the successor of my father David in governing Israel, as the Eternal promised. I have built a temple to honor the Eternal God of Israel, and I have designated a place for the ark containing the terms of the covenant the Eternal made with our ancestors when he brought them out of the land of Egypt, before the entire assembly of Israel. Solomon stood before the ark, raised his hands toward heaven, and prayed, "O Eternal God of Israel, there is no God like you in the heavens above or on the earth below, who faithfully keeps your covenant with your servants and shows unfailing love to those who walk sincerely in obedience to your ways. You have fulfilled the promise you made to my father David. You have done exactly as you said. This is clear before our eyes today, O Eternal God of Israel. Continue to keep the promises you made to my father David. There will always be a descendant of yours to sit on the throne of Israel, provided your descendants remain faithful to me, as you are, O God of Israel. May this come to pass. Confirm and fulfill these promises. Is it possible for God to dwell among us? Even the universe itself cannot contain you, how much less this temple I have built. Nevertheless, I boldly ask, hear my prayer of intercession and supplication. O Eternal God, listen to my earnest prayer offered before you. Look upon this temple day and night, the place about which you said, my name shall be honored here. Hear the prayers I offer here. From your dwelling place in heaven, forgive when someone sins against their neighbor and seeks to make amends by presenting themselves before your altar in this temple and praying to you. Hear from heaven and act justly, judging between your servants. Let the guilty one bear the consequences of their sin, and vindicate the innocent. When your people Israel are defeated by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and they return to you in this temple, acknowledging your sovereignty with fervent prayer, hear from your dwelling place in heaven. Forgive the sins of your people Israel and bring them back to the land you gave to their ancestors. When the heavens withhold rain because your people have sinned against you, and they come here to pray, acknowledging your sovereignty and turning away from their sins because of the punishment they have endured, hear from your dwelling place in heaven. Forgive the sins of your servants, your people Israel, and renew your care for them. Teach them how to live rightly, and send rain upon the land you gave to your people as an inheritance. When calamities strike, famine, pestilence, crop failure, locusts, or other plagues, or when anyone among your people Israel prays, recognizing the consequences of their wrongdoing, and stretches out their hands toward this temple, pleading for your help, hear from your dwelling place in heaven. Forgive, and act accordingly, giving each person what they deserve, for you alone know the hearts of all. Only you truly understand the human heart, so that we may live before you in constant obedience in this land you gave to our ancestors. Do not forget the foreigner, who does not belong to your people Israel but has come from a distant land because of your fame. People from all nations will come here because of your great name and the wonders of your power, to pray in this temple. Hear from your dwelling place in heaven, and respond to the foreigner's prayer, so that all the peoples of the earth may know who you are and live in reverent obedience before you, just as your people Israel do. Then they will know that you, and no one else, have made this temple what it is. When your people go out to war against their enemies, wherever you send them and whatever direction you command, and they pray to the Eternal, facing this city that you have chosen and this temple that I have built for the honor of your name, hear from heaven their prayers and petitions, and defend their cause. When your people sin against you, and surely they will, for no one is without sin, and you, in your anger, hand them over to their enemies, who take them captive to a distant or nearby land, if they repent in the land of their captivity and pray sincerely from the heart, saying, we have sinned, we have acted wickedly and perversely. And if they turn back to you wholeheartedly in the land of their oppressors and pray toward this land, the land you gave to their ancestors, this city you have chosen, and this temple I have built for the honor of your name, hear from your dwelling place in heaven their persistent and fervent prayers. Defend their cause, forgive your people who have sinned against you, and forgive their terrible rebellion. May their captors show compassion toward them, for they are your people. your precious inheritance, whom you redeemed from the iron furnace of Egypt. Hear attentively the prayers of your servant and of your people Israel whenever they cry out to you. You have chosen them from all the peoples of the earth to be your own, as you declared through your servant Moses when you brought our ancestors out of Egypt. Having finished this bold and eloquent prayer to the Eternal, Solomon stood up before the altar of the Eternal, where he had been kneeling the entire time. With arms outstretched toward heaven, Solomon stood and blessed the congregation of Israel, proclaiming in a loud voice, "Blessed be the Eternal, who has granted peace to his people as he promised." Not one of all the wonderful promises he made through Moses has failed. May the Eternal, our God, be with us as he was with our ancestors, never abandoning or forsaking us, so that we may always remain attentive and devoted to him. In this way, we can follow the path he has laid out for us, carefully heeding his instructions and walking in harmony with the rhythm he established for our ancestors. May the words I have spoken in the presence of the Eternal always remain before him day and night, so that he may do what is right for me and ensure justice for his people Israel every single day. Then all the peoples of the earth will know that the Eternal is the true God, and there is no other. As for you, live in total obedience to the Eternal, our God, following the path he has set for us. Stay mindful of everything he has shown us today. The king and all Israel worshipped and offered sacrifices to the Eternal. Solomon presented offerings of peace, sacrificing 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep to the Eternal. Thus, all Israel and the king dedicated the temple of the Eternal. On that same day, the king consecrated the central courtyard that stood before the temple of the Eternal for sacred use. There he sacrificed burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat of the peace offerings, for the bronze altar could not accommodate all these offerings. Thus, Solomon celebrated the Feast of Tabernacles with all Israel. People came from as far north as Lebo-Hamath to as far south as the Wadi of Egypt, a vast multitude. The feast lasted 7 days, followed by another 7 days to full weeks of celebration. Afterward, he dismissed the people. They blessed the king and returned home, filled with joy and gratitude in their hearts for all the good things the Eternal had done for his servant David and for all the people of Israel. The Eternal appears to Solomon again after Solomon finished building the temple of the Eternal and his royal palace, fulfilling his desire. The Eternal appeared to him once more, just as he had at Gibeon. The Eternal said, "I have heard your prayer and your fervent supplications. I have consecrated the temple you built. My name shall dwell there forever, and my eyes and heart will always be upon it. As for you, if you walk before me as your father David did with a pure heart and upright conduct, obeying my commands, respecting my guidance, and following my correction, I will uphold your reign over Israel. Just as I promised your father David, there will always be one of his descendants on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me, despise my commands, and associate with foreign gods, worshiping and serving them, then I will revoke my promise. I will cut off Israel from the land I gave them and reject this temple, which I have consecrated for the honor of my name. Israel will become an object of ridicule among all the peoples of the earth. This majestic temple will fall into ruin, and strangers passing by will shake their heads, saying, 'What happened here? Why is it in ruins?' And someone will answer, 'The people who lived here betrayed the Eternal, their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt. They associated with foreign gods, worshipped them, and served them, and that is why this destruction came upon them.'" Solomon's achievements and offerings. After 20 years of constructing the temple of the Eternal and his royal palace, Solomon gave King Hiram of Tyre 20 cities in the region of Galilee as a gesture of gratitude. Hiram had supplied all the cedar, pine, and gold that Solomon desired. Hiram traveled from Tyre to inspect the cities but was displeased with what he saw. He exclaimed, "What kind of gift is this, my friend? What useless cities!" To this day, the people refer to those cities as the worthless reward Hiram received from Solomon for the 4,200 talents of gold he provided. This is the record of Solomon's accomplishments and labor force. He built the temple of the Eternal, his royal palace, the Millo fortifications, the walls of Jerusalem, and fortified cities such as Hazah, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, attacked, captured, and burned Gezer, killing all its Canaanite inhabitants. He then gave the city as a dowry to his daughter, Solomon's wife. Solomon rebuilt it and also constructed Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and tad more in the wilderness distant cities used as storage centers, villages for horses, and chariot bases. Solomon built everything he desired in Jerusalem, Lebanon, and throughout his kingdom. The remnants of the ancient inhabitants of the land, the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, were conscripted into forced labor for Solomon's projects. The land, the Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, those who were not Israelites and had survived the wars, Solomon conscripted into forced labor. To this day, they continue to perform such labor. However, the true Israelites were not treated this way. They served in the army and in administrative roles as government leaders, commanders of chariots, and chariot drivers. They also served as officials overseeing projects and construction work. Solomon appointed 550 overseers to manage those subjected to forced labor. After Pharaoh's daughter moved from the city of David to the palace specially built for her, Solomon fortified the Millo. 3 times a year, Solomon offered sacrifices on the altar of the Eternal. He presented burnt offerings, peace offerings, and burned incense in the presence of the Eternal. Everything related to the temple was handled by Solomon with great care and generosity. King Solomon also built ships at Ezion-Geber, near Eloth on the coast of Edom by the Red Sea. Hiram sent experienced sailors to assist Solomon's crew. They sailed to Ophir and brought back 16 tons of gold for Solomon. The visit of the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba heard of Solomon's fame through the name of the Eternal and came to test him with difficult questions. She arrived in Jerusalem with great pomp, accompanied by a retinue and camels laden with spices, a large quantity of gold, and precious stones. During her audience with Solomon, she discussed everything that interested her, opening her heart before him. Solomon answered all her questions without hesitation or embarrassment. When the Queen of Sheba witnessed Solomon's wisdom firsthand, saw his palace, the food served at his table, the accommodations for his high officials, the impeccable attire of his servants, the opulence of his vessels, and the generous offerings made at the temple of the Eternal, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "All I have heard about you is true. The reputation of your achievements and wisdom in my country has been confirmed. I would not have believed it if I had not seen it with my own eyes. It was no exaggeration. Your wisdom and elegance far exceed what I could have imagined. Blessed are the men and women who serve you, for being near you every day and hearing your wise words. Blessed be the Eternal, your God, who delighted in you and made you king." Without a doubt, the Eternal's love for Israel is behind all this. He has established you as king to uphold justice and righteousness. She gave Solomon a gift of over 4 tons of gold, a vast amount of spices, and precious stones. Never before had such a quantity of spices been seen as those brought by the Queen of Sheba for Solomon. Hiram's ships also imported gold from Ophir, along with large quantities of sandalwood and precious stones. From the sandalwood, the king crafted railings for the temple of the Eternal and the royal palace. He also used it to make harps and lyres for the musicians. Never again was such a shipment of sandalwood received. In return, Solomon gave the Queen of Sheba everything she desired and requested, in addition to the generous gifts she had already received from him. Satisfied with what she had seen, she returned to her country with her retinue. Every year, Solomon received 25 tons of gold, not counting the income from taxes and profits from trade with merchants and various kings and governors. King Solomon had 200 large shields made of hammered gold, each weighing 3,600 grams, and 300 smaller shields of 1,800 grams of hammered gold each. He stored the shields in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. The king constructed an immense throne of ivory, overlaid with pure gold. The throne had 6 steps, with a rounded backrest. On either side of the armrests were lions, and at the end of each step was a lion. There was no throne like it in any of the surrounding kingdoms. All of King Solomon's cups were made of pure gold, as were all the utensils in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. At the time, silver was considered cheap and very common because of its abundance. The king had a fleet of ships that traveled with Hiram's ships. Every 3 years, the fleet returned with a cargo of gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. King Solomon was the wisest and wealthiest of all the kings of the earth, surpassing them all. People from all corners of the world came to see Solomon and to absorb some of the wisdom God had given him. Each year, visitors arrived in large numbers, bringing gifts of gold and silver, modern weapons, exotic spices, horses, and mules. Solomon amassed 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, which he stationed in specially designated cities, especially for them, and also in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common as stones and cedar wood as plentiful as the fig trees of the plains. His horses were imported from Egypt and Cilicia, acquired by the king's agents. A chariot from Egypt cost 600 shekels of silver, and a horse about 150 shekels. Solomon traded these with the royal courts of the Hittites and Arameans. Solomon turns away from the Lord. King Solomon was infatuated with women. Pharaoh's daughter was only the first of many foreign women. He took Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. He married women from the surrounding pagan nations, despite the Eternal's stern warning to the Israelites, "You shall not intermarry with such women, for they will lead you astray to worship other gods." Nevertheless, Solomon became deeply attached to these women and did not reject them. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, a total of 1,000 women. As Solomon grew older, his wives turned his heart toward their foreign gods, and his loyalty to the Eternal waned. He did not remain faithful to the Eternal as his father David had. Solomon began to worship Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He openly rejected the Eternal, failing to follow in the footsteps of his father David. On a hill east of Jerusalem, he built an altar to Chemosh, the abhorrent god of Moab, and another to Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He constructed similar altars for all the foreign gods of his wives, who polluted the land with the smoke and incense of their sacrifices. The Eternal was furious with Solomon for abandoning the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and explicitly commanded him not to associate with other gods. Solomon disobeyed the Lord's commandments. So the Eternal said to him, "Since you have no intention of remaining loyal to me or obeying my commands, I will take the kingdom away from you and give it to another. But out of respect for your father David, I will not do this during your lifetime. Your son will bear the consequences. I will tear the kingdom from his hands. But I will leave him one tribe for the sake of my servant David and for Jerusalem, the city I have chosen." The Eternal stirred up adversaries against Solomon. One was Hadad, a descendant of the king of Edom. Long before, when David had defeated Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, stayed in the region for 6 months to bury the dead and massacre every male in Edom. During that time, Hadad, who was a young boy, fled with some Edomite servants of his father. They traveled through Midian and reached Paran, where they gathered men and went to Egypt. The Pharaoh gave Hadad a house, provisions, and even land. The king of Egypt grew fond of him and gave him his wife Queen Tapin's sister in marriage. She bore him a son, Genubath, who was raised in the royal household alongside the Pharaoh's own children. Later, while still in Egypt, Hadad heard that David and Joab, the commander of the army, had died. He asked the Pharaoh, "Please let me go back to my homeland." The Pharaoh replied, "Why, what is lacking here that makes you want to leave?" Hadad answered, "Nothing, but please let me return to my country." The Eternal also raised up another adversary against Solomon, Rezon, the son of Eliada, who had fled from his master, King Hadadezer of Zobah. After David had defeated the Arameans, Rezon gathered a band of lawless men and became their leader. They later settled in Damascus, where Rezon became king. Both Hadad and Rezon were thorns in Israel's side throughout Solomon's reign. Hadad ruled over Syria and harbored hatred for Israel. The final blow came through Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who rebelled against the king. He was an Ephraimite from Zerida, and his mother was a widow named Zeruiah. Jeroboam worked in Solomon's administration and rose to prominence because of his competence and skill in construction work. When Solomon saw how diligent he was, he put him in charge of the forced labor in the tribe of Joseph. One day, as Jeroboam was leaving Jerusalem, he encountered Ahijah the prophet from Shiloh, who was wearing a new cloak. The two were alone in a desolate place along the road. Ahijah took off his cloak, tore it into 12 pieces, and said to Jeroboam, "Take 10 of these pieces, for this is what the Eternal, the God of Israel, says. I am about to tear the kingdom from Solomon's hands and give you 10 tribes. Out of respect for my servant David and for Jerusalem, the city I have chosen, 1 tribe will remain under Solomon's rule. This is because Solomon has abandoned me and worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh. the god of Moab, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. Single quotes the god of the Moabites and Molech, the god of the Ammonites. He no longer follows my guidance, ignores my will, disobeys my instructions, and violates my commands. He is very different from his father. Nevertheless, I will not take the entire kingdom from him during his lifetime. I will remain faithful to him because of my servant David, whom I chose and who obeyed my commands and followed my laws. But I will remove the kingdom from his son's control, and 10 tribes will be given to you. I will leave 1 tribe under his son's rule as a testimony to my servant David in Jerusalem, the city I have chosen as a memorial to my name. However, you will rule over the rest, govern according to your heart's desire, and you will become king of Israel. If you listen to me and live according to my guidance, doing what pleases me, following my instructions, and obeying my commands as my servant David did, I will remain loyal to you no matter what happens. Your kingdom will be as secure as the one I established for David. Israel will be yours. I am bringing pain and sorrow upon the descendants of David, but this judgment will not last forever. Solomon decreed that Jeroboam should be put to death, but he fled to Egypt and sought refuge with King Shishak. He remained in exile until Solomon's death. The rest of Solomon's life, reign, works, and wisdom are recorded in the Chronicles of Solomon. Solomon reigned in Jerusalem and governed Israel for 40 years. He died and was buried in the city of David, and his son Rehoboam succeeded him as king.